On Rosh Hashanah, I shared with you some thoughts and reflections on our trip to Israel and our experiences there. What I didn't talk about then, that I will a little bit now, is that one of the things that was most difficult for those of us who were in the situation we were in, who were watching the anxiety and agony of the people Israel struggling with how to handle so much rocket fire at their civilian population, escalated by something else that had happened before, of course, the kidnappings and murders. To watch the agony with which Israelis were trying to figure out what to do and how to do it with as little loss of life as possible. And then to see the media coverage of that situation on CNN, on other Western broadcasting channels, on cable when we were in Israel, because some of us can't understand all of the news in Hebrew, so we turned to American-speaking channels, and the way it was represented in the news was absolutely terrible. Nothing was talked about in the news about the agony that Israelis were going through, trying to decide how ethically and morally to respond, to take out tunnels and weapons caches when they are located in schools and hospitals, when human shields are used in places where they know there are weapons of destruction stored. So we didn't see any of that. We never saw anything other than this discussion of Israel and her disproportionate response. And then I flew through Europe to come home because we were detoured. Any of us who were not on El Al were detoured. And so I went through Europe, and while sitting waiting for my flight from London to the States, I was looking at English newspapers in the airport lounge and was shocked and appalled at the amount of anti-Semitic things that were printed, that people felt absolutely comfortable and free to print and to say, and to have, again, the story completely skewed in the world media, in the world conversation. It's not that there shouldn't have been a lot of conversation, but that wasn't there. The conversation about what was happening in Israel wasn't in the papers. But we know it isn't limited to the situation with Israel and Gaza. It just became a way, an excuse for us to see anti-Semitic things in a lot of places that we frankly thought we were done seeing it openly expressed. Pick up the New York Times, pick up Newsweek, and what you find there is a discussion of the anti-Semitism that is driving people to leave France and make Aliyah. You're finding anti-Semitism in places where it's erupting in ways that are absolutely terrifying. I was born in '65, raised in a Jewish private school, yeshiva high school. I've marinated in a Jewish environment my entire life. So I know from the PTSD Judaism that we got a taste of growing up in the 60s and 70s in Jewish parochial school. Because of the Shoah, because of the catastrophe of our own time, we know the very real threat of anti-Semitism. We know where it can go and where it can quickly lead. So I don't say anything as anything but a realist to you today. Rabbi Richard Rubenstein writes, in our own times, the demonic has released itself from its dark and brooding cave in men's hearts and stalks about as if possessed of its own peculiar dignity. There is a horror, a demonic horror that is once again being tolerated in our world community. And make no mistake, once it's the Jews, it's other people, and we know this. Because racism, xenophobia, homophobia, any kind of obia or ism is not based in logic. It's the Jews because. It's not based in logic. It's crazy. And we know where crazy goes. So how do we deal with this? We tend to think, having lived in the shadow of the Shoah, that we are unique as a generation of Jews. I certainly was raised in some ways to believe that. That we are unique. We have seen horrors that no other Jewish community has ever seen. But once you really look at Jewish history, it's not that hard to find other times that were just as frightening, that were just as anxiety-producing, that were just as real in terms of their terror, their danger, the mortality, the suffering, the torture. All of it was just as real as the Shoah. The Churban, the destruction of the temple, this was a catastrophe for our people. That's what Churban means, the catastrophe. Most of the population of Jerusalem was killed or carried off, worse, said some, into slavery. Decimated the population of Israel. What was the response? What are we, who are not unique, as Jews supposed to find as the response? A Jewish response. It's one we've lived with through the Crusades and the Inquisitions, the pogroms, the ghettos. What is our response? If you go back to the response to the Churban through Jewish literature, you find the response in Midrash. All the Midrashim you see ever that are dealing with Egypt, it ain't dealing with Egypt. Egypt is a metaphor. Egypt is a code word for evil incarnate, an empire of evil under which Jews are subjected along with other peoples always, and of course, to horrific realities and dangers and suffering. We look at a midrash. What's one example of the rabbis working with their anxiety about their own lived situations by placing it in Egypt? We have a midrash, a surprising midrash, that Avram and Yocheved, after the decree of Pharaoh that all baby boys should be drowned in the Nile, separated. And they told all the Hebrews they should separate from their wives and husbands so that there could be no chance of pregnancy, because it was too awful what it was going to mean for those babies born. And Yocheved and Avram and Amram separated, and their daughter Miriam, the prophetess, goes to them and she says, "You can't do this. You're destroying our people." And they said, "What are you talking about? It's Pharaoh who's destroying our people. Did you not hear the decree?" And Miriam says, "Pharaoh only decreed to destroy the boys. You are destroying the girls as well." What was she saying? She was calling her parents into an incredible paradox. Have children. Yes, the ones that are boys will die. But there will be girls. And someday the decree will be somehow overturned. And if we don't continue to populate, how will the future ever be different? There won't be a Hebrew people. It won't matter. Pharaoh wins. And this, she said, is forbidden, according to our tradition. And so they get back together. And who is born out of that union? Moses. The one whose birth and adoption by Pharaoh's daughter changes everything and brings down, ultimately, the empire of evil with God's help. When you see in medieval commentary like Rambam, Maimonides, the scientist, the physician, when you see him talk about the Messianic age, he's not stupid. He's not talking about Mashiach, about the Messiah. He's talking about a future that could be different than the future we're living in now. Because what did the Messianic age mean for Rambam? It meant Jewish sovereignty. Read his last chapter of Mishnah Torah, and you will see his discussion of what it means, the Messianic age, Yemei HaMashiach. It means Jewish sovereignty, Jews having their own land and power and control over their own lives. You can call it fanciful, but guess what? Because of people like him, 2,000 years from when we were first dealing with the Churban, Jews have sovereignty in the land of Israel. called him delusional, Yemei Mashiach right, the Jews being sovereign right. Had there not been students of Rambam, had there not been people ready and prepared to hope, to do it differently, to work for a different kind of time, we would not be traveling to Israel with a KI group. And he knew. He talks about facing reality. How do we do this? The rabbis, Rambam, how do we face a reality that's so uncertain, so dangerous, so scary when we know what can happen? In his last book, From Defender to Critic, The Search for a New Jewish Self, philosopher David Hartman distinguishes between two kinds of hope. Utopian, which is escapist, and realistic hope, a Jewish value vital for leaders in our day and age. He says realistic hope is the belief or conviction that present reality, what I see, does not exhaust the potentialities of the status quo. And potentialities cannot be measured precisely or predicted with certainty. And there's a danger that leaders, fearful of such uncertainties, will equate the improbable with the impossible, rather than envision the plausible. It'll take you 6 weeks to unpack that. But he says plausible hope liberates action, for it provides a means to overcome the paralysis of dejection, to act and speak as if the present exhausts what is possible, becomes self-fulfilling. This is the real danger of our time, I believe. The real danger of our time is that we not live into what Richard Rubinstein says is giving Hitler a posthumous victory. The 11th commandment, according to Dr. Rabbi Richard Rubinstein, is that we keep this Jewish tradition alive. Our wisdom literature, our ethics, our values, our literature, our music. Have you heard Cantor Frankel? You think he just wrote all that? Well, his dad wrote a lot of it, but he's handed that tradition. He was fed that tradition from infancy, from his father, the late and blessed Chazan. We don't just pick that up. It's given as a gift to us. Rabbi Jonathan Spira Sabat says, by creating more experiences of community in which we feel connected to people we don't even know, we can increase our feelings of responsibility for one another. You over there probably don't know her over there. But that doesn't matter today. And it doesn't matter in this context. That's a gorgeous and beautiful thing that we don't get nearly enough of in our society. We have our Facebook friends. If you're outside of my purview, it doesn't, we try to care, but we're really not really filled with a sense of responsibility. But in this place, in this hall, you get it. That we are in this together, even if we don't know each other. We are responsible for one another. Where are our young people learning this? Where are they learning responsibility for people they don't know? Like really getting it. Yes, okay, maybe on the soccer team, on the soccer field, okay. But that's different. It's good, it's wonderful. It's different than this. In Midrash Tana Devet Eliyahu, as retold by Alan Liu, it says, we heal one another by being together. We give each other hope. Now we know for sure by ourselves, ein banu ma'asim, there is nothing we can do. But gathered together as a single indivisible entity, we sense that we do in fact have efficacy as a larger transcendent spirit unit, one that has been expressing meaning and continuity for 3,000 years. One that includes everyone who is here with everyone who is not here. All those who are joined in that great stream of spiritual consciousness from which we have been struggling to know God for thousands of years. Right now, we stand today in that stream. That is the first thing we do on the new year. Are our kids digging their feet into the clay of the stream of the Jewish people? 3,000 years back, and God willing, thousands of years into the future, they need to be part of that. We need to make them part of that. We have a responsibility to them, to the future, to instill Jewish experiences, Jewish values, and to use our Jewish values to speak for people everywhere who are in danger. And they are everywhere in our world, unfortunately, today. We know out of our particular history the absolute need to stand up and speak against not only anti-Semitism, but every kind of hate. Every kind of hate in our world community. Hope is how many of our best rabbis, teachers, and thinkers have called us into living Jewish values. The word tikva, it's the national anthem of Israel. HaTikva. Because for 2,000 years they called us crazy. They still call us crazy. But for 2,000 years we were called naive, delusional, whatever. But because for 2,000 years we continued tikva, hope, we now have it as the national anthem of the sovereign state of the land, of the Jewish people, and all who want to participate in it. HaTikva. The root of tikva, kuf, vav, he, kava, is first found in the Torah. In its first found, it means thread. A thread that one stretches out. And it is the thread dropped by the prostitute Rachav out her window to allow Joshua and Caleb a signal that that's where she is, so she who was spying for them could get out during the invasion of the book of Joshua. Why kava? Why a cord? Because a cord can stretch. You think of a spider web. When it stretches, it is a representation of a viable future. That is the meaning of hope. And it also means in the Torah to wait, kava. To wait. It's not now. It's not happening yet. But we must stretch towards a future that's not here yet. That is the definition in our Hebrew language of hope. That's what it means. And we know any thread breaks easily by itself. What are the strongest ropes made out of? Hundreds and hundreds of threads wrapped together. Kol Yisrael arivin ze bazeh. Every person of the people of Israel is wrapped and entwined and tangled up with the rest of the people of Israel. And us, God willing, with the entire world. We can't do it all at once. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. Don't worry about it, says our tradition. It's not on you to finish the work. It's not on you to do the whole thing. Velo ata ben chori lehitpater mimena. Neither are you free to desist from beginning it. Let us work together in community, with the world community, with allies, good people everywhere. And there are good people everywhere. Let us do the work together of stretching forward in hope of a viable future of peace for this world. I'll close with the story of a child who discovered a map of the world in a newspaper and brought it to a teacher who studied it thoughtfully and then tore it into pieces and threw it on the floor and said, that's the state of our world today. That's the reality. Very quickly, the child was able to tape the entire thing back together. And the teacher was astonished. It's a young child who didn't know geography all that well. Said, how were you able to put it together so quickly? And the child said, there was a picture of a person on the other side. I put that picture, that person together, and turned it over, and the rest of the world was repaired. One person, one situation, one conversation, one heart, one experience at a time. Let us move this year into hope that our world has a chance to be repaired. Shana Tova. The Dor Vador, one generation to another. From generation to generation, it is our obligation to teach